Great. Okay.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Uh,
Fine.
I've started the
Finally, sorry.
recording, and I guess we'll try to later on when Krisztina is talking, we can mute ourselves. And wonderful to have you here, Krisztina. I'm not going to waste any more time with everything or introductions. We are thrilled to have you here, and we are recording this session, as you know. And we'll have a session with Q&As afterwards. And like I said, super if everyone can mute when you're not talking. And, Krisztina will do her presentation, and then we can do Q&As afterwards. So super warm welcome. The stage is all yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for the invitation, Sharon and Anne. It's been a pleasure just, getting ready and preparing this entire conversation. And in the meantime, I'm just putting the slideshow on full screen so you'll be able to follow my most important findings and observations. And it's a very unusual setup for me because I never had the pleasure to talk to this community. However, I do believe that we have a lot of things to share in common, and I'm a big believer of let's say, disruptive thinking and just knowing our own capabilities. So I decided to provide a title for this conversation, which would be the following: the cost of being capable, how women in the travel industry can turn friction into strategic advantage. Let's see the most important points here. First of all, welcome, greetings everyone. One more time, I just wanted to make sure that I address all of you, even later when you'll be watching the video. Welcome, future disruptors. I really hope that all of you out there are disruptors, and it means one thing for me, that you're going against the flow. Because we can say that if you believe that entrepreneurship begins where certainty ends, then we're going to be on the same page. And this is going to be a really honest conversation about facts, about important observations, about some data that I was finding, and a couple of shared methods that I would like you to follow and implement throughout your personal growth and career. A couple of words about myself before I kickstart the conversation. If I had to define in one sentence what I've been doing recently, I am positioned somewhere in between academia and startups, where, let's say, theory is always meeting resistance and only what survives truly matters. By profession, originally I'm an economist, and I am an associate professor at La Roche Marbella. We are an international university of hospitality. I'm not sure how much you heard about our portfolio. It's been quite diverse. We have programs related to private jet, which are kicking in, cruises, and not just strictly interpreted hospitality. We have a lot of executive programs, and I've been with La Roche since 2022, first as an external, and then slowly, steadily as a full-time faculty with a lot of roles, supervision, coordinating a pathway, and dissertations. Apart from that, my passion and my important focus is startups. Since 2020, so since the pandemic, I have discovered this new line that I've been following, and I also turned into a startup friction strategist and a startup mentor. I've been contacted by a company, and they reached out to build a market analysis. It was a fintech startup. It was really exciting, and that just kind of pulled me into the world of startups. And slowly, steadily, again, I was getting just a little bit more knowledge. And my most important core is to provide a framework, let's say a strategic tool, to those founders who are in an early stage, but they really do not know how to get started, how to find real existing market demand, and what important steps should be taken to validate that idea and defend it in front of the investors. Apart from that, just a little bit of some of my hobbies. I am one of the hosts of Le Roche Talks. It's a really interesting podcast show. We have it on YouTube and also on Spotify. And we're trying to invite a lot of really diverse profiles, not always from hospitality or travel industry, but real estate, generally the tech industry, entrepreneurs, even mindfulness. And I had the pleasure to meet such really great people and to have those conversations with them. If you're interested, go ahead and just look it up on YouTube, Lit Rush Talks and you will find a lot of interesting episodes that might be relevant for you as well in your background. And back to my core focus, last year in April, I created a framework that was named The Clash. And I will be explaining you a little bit what that means, because I believe that if you do have innovative and disruptive business ideas, maybe in the future when you decide that you already accumulated so much experience and value that you're ready to share it with your community in a different form, then you can find it useful. And I also developed my own GPT tool that is called Clash Lab, the Startup Friction Coach. You can also look it up. And it helps anyone to develop a very, let's say, realistic project. If you have anything, just a basic idea what you would like to do, or you already have a pitch presentation, you go ahead. Even you can start just writing a complaint as a guest, as a traveler, something bad, a negative experience that happened to you in the past, and it will help you to turn that negative experience and set of complaints into something that might be a problem statement that you can turn into a solution, and eventually you will have a disruptive and innovative business idea. So go ahead, give it a try, and I hope it will be something useful for your development as well. And just to add something more personal, I have 3 dogs. I am really in love with anything to do with nature. So trying to get out of the campus as much as possible. I live in South Spain, in between Malaga and Marbella, in the beautiful countryside, surrounded by mountains. And I also believe that, in order just to have our mental balance, it's so important to be part of the nature and not to get kidnapped in offices and artificial buildings. But that's about me. But let's get started with a little bit more solid approach here, what I would like you to have a look at. There's one really important observation of mine. And technically, I was brought up in Central and Eastern Europe because I'm from Hungary, Budapest. And that culture, that mentality was dictating me from the moment that I remember myself that stability is everything. We have to choose it over any kind of risk, especially as women. That was a safe environment. I felt it makes sense. And from a really, really young age, I was always taught and inducted into avoiding any kind of uncertainty, right? And do not to make start any conflict, not to raise any questions, not to go against the flow. And that was something, when you're told not to do something else because this or that will happen to you, develops a really closed mindset. And I was not the only one who experienced it. You, as a young woman, you were encouraged to keep your head down, whether it's your private life or actually your school, your development, your career, to work hard no matter what, because work will eventually bring you to success. It will lift you up, and not to ask way too many questions. That was dangerous. That was a red flag. You're not asking questions, okay? Conflict avoidance was one of the most appreciated features of young women. And obedience, right? It was always viewed as good behavior for girls, okay? Last but not least, what I also realized, right, when I was already out of that environment, that success, it was equivalent with security and making ends meet, okay? But there was no ambition behind that, no impact, no passion, and nothing that would just challenge the status quo. When I collected all these thoughts, I just realized that this is something that I would love to refer to in the future as the baby boomer playbook. Because if you think about that generation, maybe you're part of that, you might know it quite well from that experience. This is how they were raised up. This is how they were taught to work and, just to become more or less successful in life, to avoid anything uncertain, not to start businesses, and as women, just keep your head down and go with the flow. And one of the core points that I am always trying to bring up to the surface, that we can no longer live by the rules of the baby boomers. They're really damaging. That environment is not safe because the false safety that it creates around young women, even if they're baby boomers, right? It will just put them naturally into a trap that doesn't allow them to grow. And we're living in the post-pandemic global economy, right? Too much uncertainty. It's everywhere. So if you're scared of change, if you do not know how to estimate the constantly changing preference of your guests, your customers, the travelers, if you are not willing to take any risk or to start a disruptive business idea, it doesn't even have to be a startup, then this is going to be a really, really significant disadvantage, and it will just push you back, okay, behind everyone else, right? Besides, if you're still wondering what else is out there, we were expected to follow the very traditional, really classy linear female life path. And I'm sure that most of you are really familiar with that. Well, education is important, really high grades, right? You have to be overachiever with all those grades. Getting married super early as well, right? Owning properties and just working at the same company, within the same role, within the same profession until the end of your life, literally, okay? And what happened is that there was this message popping up in my head that you're not allowed to want too much in life, you cannot stand out, and you're not allowed to take risks, okay? So back to entrepreneurship, we can say that this went it in that society, and again, I'm talking about Central and Eastern Europe, but I'm sure there are a lot of many other countries which somehow, you might resonate, that this might resonate with you, that this is the only option for women, okay? Capability was rewarded only in those cases when you were able to stay silent, okay? And you did not raise any voice or any question. So what happened? As a result, this early tension between you being capable and, being expected to stay very small, it turned into a sort of a cage or an obstacle that doesn't allow you to move on. The way you think, the way you grow, the way you imagine your career. And this led me to the realization that call it as something we could refer to as the capability trap, especially highly intelligent and very, very hardworking young women. Important, we're talking about young women at this level. They're often placed in such a track where dependence is the most important feature. You cannot get rid of that, okay? You're going to be a problem solver. You will be a fixer, right? Not a builder, but a fixer. It's also a mentality, but you will be dependent on literally everything that surrounds you in your environment. Increased performance leads to increased workload, okay? So the harder you work, the more you work, right? It will cause one thing, just increase of your workload, but not your salary, not success, not growth or anything like that. However, real growth, authority, and even recognition, they will be consistently put on hold, okay? I do believe that many of you might agree with me about the capability trap, and it's still part of our reality. It's not just a generational thing, it's just something that is not really emphasized enough, okay? It does come with a lot of costs. I'm an economist, as I said before, and my brain is always telling me the alternative cost, the trade-offs. What is the opportunity cost? If someone is highly intelligent, you're capable, but you're not able to move on. So if we turn back to the travel industry and, the realities out there since 2020, you are apparently very familiar with this environment because always on customer service pressure. This is something that just doesn't allow you to think about anything else. A crisis management approach as well, right? We're living in a so-called perm anxiety. It's an abbreviation, permanent anxiety, when all customers, all travelers, all guests, and even employees within this sector, they're always expecting that something negative will happen. Okay, so your mentality is suggesting you negative scenarios one after another, like a tsunami, right? And this is really dangerous. Emotional labor in guest-facing roles, so you cannot take yourself out of that environment either. And the most important part is under-recognized leadership load. Okay, so these are the most important observations about the invisible costs. A couple of key insights here. Being a capable woman often means that you are growing into this role of being a by default problem solver of others. Okay, more responsibility, less structural support, and a rapidly rising burnout risk when it comes to entrepreneurship or technically anything. It's a really sad fact, but this is what we're dealing with. Let's get a couple of statistics. I really believe in data. I really try to follow all the latest statistics, and some of them were actually pretty shocking. because if you have a look at the percentages, women make up about 54% of the global tourism workforce. Honestly, I was expecting even a higher percentage, and you can even see the breakdown within the different services, right? So the travel services themselves, it's approximately 70%, accommodation a little bit less, food and beverage a little bit, just a little bit below 60%. And the other important highlight here is that women hold only around not even 40% of managerial positions in travel and tourism. This is also a pattern that is not really improving, okay? And the pay gap, right, that we earn 10-15% less. These are averages, right? So really important, these are averages here compared to men globally. And female tourism executives, so if we go even higher up, can earn over 38% less than men, okay? So this is something that has to be emphasized well. The next thing here, what came to my mind was the so-called structural pattern. When you think about the fact that women are empowering and running the travel industry operation-wise, however, they're so badly underrepresented in all leadership roles. They're underpaid in most of the cases, and structurally, right, redistributed in high responsibility but lower authority roles, right? And again, what is going to be the real cause behind that? If the pattern is not broken, if no one comes to challenge the system and to make real change, then we can say that women are technically the majority of this labor force, as we could see by the stats. Women are the frontline problem solvers, and they are not involved into any proportional leadership growth. So where is this all taking us? Okay, let's have a look at some possible scenarios. There are two options here. The first one, and this is technically the most frequently observed pattern, when we just say yes, we continue as we were raised and inducted by the baby boomer rules and the playbook. You accept the set facts. You do not want to really do anything against it. You will continue operating, working under high pressure without a sufficient increase of your salary, and you just accept those natural limits. Okay, this is something that probably the majority of us are we're doing it, and it sounds quite normal, but it's not. And the second option, what we have is that we start very intentionally, consciously redesigning, let's say, the route, the path, the trajectory, by setting certain boundaries, saying no to things, making strategic choices that work for us. So we have to be much more ego driven here. And to become technically disruptive, the word that I was using at the very beginning of my presentation, in the way we lead, the way we build, and the way we say yes to things. So what can we do? Let's continue with a couple of solutions here. Another important fact that not every structure can be altered through resistance. Okay, so before we think that there should be some really significant uprising happening globally, there are things that it's just not worth changing them with resistance. Okay, it will not break. We're looking for points that might be broken, and fighting, facing every possible limitation, things that do not work, is extremely costly for us emotionally, and also quite irrational, right? Because the rules of the environment are so embedded into the base, into the core of how we live, how we lead our life, that those things cannot be altered, okay? But the real shift is rather something else. I will call it as a strategic agency, when you're the one who can choose where to put your energy into. You're the one who decides where to push for that change in your tight environment, at your home, at your workplace, your relationship with the management, your relationship with the travelers, with the guests, with the customers, and where exactly to redesign your own path for the future instead of always looking for permission of others. This is really difficult, right? Because the way we think is that everything is fine. I'm not allowed to say no. I'm not allowed to have a different thought. And probably much more less than those who are more experienced, or anything else similar to that. One key message that I really want to radiate: not every rule has to be fought, right? But I believe that every capable and intelligent woman should have the willingness and the ability to decide which rules are really, really perfect for being challenged, being recreated, and which systems are the ones that we must start outgrowing. Because change begins if a lot of us just naturally come to the realization that, yes, I do see already that this system doesn't work for me. I will say it out loud, first to myself, then to my environment, and I will start looking for an alternative route that will probably it will take me much further, right? But this is really scary. How did my journey begin? And now I'm getting back to another personal story, because apart from being an economist and a professor in a university, I was always someone that is technically a builder. I'm not a fixer, so I go against all the rules and all the examples mentioned before. Um, Last year in April, I was just traveling to Switzerland, and I was ready to start my new executive cohort in Crans-Montana with La Roche. And when you get that really annoying aisle seat, like literally you cannot even move, there is no Wi-Fi, and I just had my physical old notebook with the footprint of my dog, and I had a pen with me. So I started to sketch and put a little draft together. And I was planning a system, a method, an approach that would help those who have different thoughts, disruptive ideas, that would guide them step by step what to accomplish in order not to make mistakes, like a lot of founders and entrepreneurs do every single day. And what I realized, that there was a huge gap, and that gap was that technically those who are early stage founders of either a startup or any other business idea, they are not really provided real support. There were no frameworks, there was no motivation, no honesty even, okay? And a lot of mentors who are out there and they're trying to offer their services. They're there to take your money, and they're not going to tell you honestly what's wrong, where your idea breaks, what will be the friction that you should be following. And I specifically find it difficult for young women, because we're naturally really shy. We don't really like to ask that many questions, and we believe that we do not have that much room out there in the middle of a bunch of men who are already executives or they're founders of companies. So this is something that I felt had to be addressed at the moment, and I could not ignore it anymore. So what happened? I started to think of how to recreate what we normally understand about innovative and disruptive businesses. And this is something where I think female representation is really, really low. If you look into available statistics, you would be shocked. It's a risky search for something that truly works. If you want the most simple definition you will ever find about startups, I will give you this one. Remember it. You want to build something that is a risky journey, a risky search, right, that you have to conduct, and you're trying to realize something that actually works. So what is that formula? I would suggest you to follow. Find the problem, no matter what it is, you will be able to articulate it quite well. And the best, if you think about something negative that happened to you as a personal experience, you will realize that there's a lot of uncertainty around that problem. It's not emphasized enough. Not many people bring it up. There's no data, no evidence. So you start testing, you start getting all that feedback, you start talking with your colleagues, with maybe guests, depending on where that problem is coming from. And that constant and iteration and pivoting will eventually put you on a growth trajectory that we can actually call as a startup. So 4 phases: problem, uncertainty, testing, and growth. Sounds really simple, but when you start doing it, there's nothing more challenging than following this step by step. What I have been experiencing in the previous few years, that all of us could possibly mention quite a lot of very famous startup companies and businesses, even entrepreneurs. And there are quite a lot from the hospitality industry and from the travel sector, but not that many compared with other options. And this is not a representative example. Yet, since the COVID, which completely disrupted every single industry, but especially the broadly interpreted hospitality, we can actually see that the number of startups is really, really on the rise. And there's so many young lady entrepreneurs who are just going out there. They do pitch presentations, they go for investors' throats, they create the most wonderful systems. I really hope that you heard of a couple of fem startups as well. You know, when you're trying to develop a disruptive solution for specifically women-related issues on the market, and this is on the rise. And I really hope that many of you who will be able to watch this video even later on, you're already thinking what kind of problems are out there for women within this sector that should be addressed in a really disruptive way, knowing the real problem, collecting all the uncertainty and signals, testing, pivoting, changing, and eventually turning it into a solution that probably works much better than the competition itself. Okay? So the world has changed quite a lot, right? I've been talking about this, and there are three things that we cannot ignore. One of them is context, right? So whatever happens in your environment, we have to be aware of that. Timing, when to enter, when to recognize, realize that problem, and the reality, not the noise. There are way too many signals coming in. People are talking about a lot of issues, a lot of problems, so much trends out there. Everyone is complaining, but we must develop that radar, which would help us to truly recognize the reality, okay? Something that can be proved with data, that could be justified with real complaints, with real feedback from others, okay? And apart from pandemic, right, it's not even a thing anymore. There's so many other things that put us in a very uncertain position, right? Think about the geopolitical events, what's going on with the prices globally, inflation, right? We're talking about pay gaps, the salary differences, the acceleration of artificial intelligence, which is a huge opportunity as well for women, yet also a sort of a threat as well. And naturally, the burnout culture, okay? So we must say that uncertainty it's not just a stage anymore. It is not a phase. It's technically something that is permanently with us. It's an operating system. And remember what I told you, that women are not that good with uncertainty, naturally, evolutionary, right? So we have to do something about that. I collected for you a couple of useful problems that might help you to let's say, a little bit rethink how you imagine any possible idea that you would like to develop in the future. And one of the first problems, if you ever had your own radical thought what to do and how to challenge a little bit the systems, is a big illusion. Because we were told in the past that if you want to start your own business, especially if you're a woman, you have to move really fast. You have to be better, you have to be louder, you have to be faster than men, okay? But how to do that, okay? We just see all the noise. There's so many efforts, so many attempts, so many companies that fail, so many other companies that are on the rise. But how do we distinguish, right, noise from real traction? We were told to be confident, okay? There is no such thing. If you remember, probably those really typical American movies when young girls were writing their essays before being accepted to the university, and for some reason, the example that comes to your mind, I want to be like Hillary Clinton or anything like that, or the first lady, right? And being confident is not really a skill anymore, or an expectation or a bottom line these days. And we have quite a lot of doubt, right? We were talking about doubt, how difficult it is. And raising capital was another important, let's say, illusion that we were encouraged to follow and to stick to it. But when you start looking for capital, there's a crazy competition out there. And we just realize how fragile, how vulnerable the demand is. So how are you really going to break through the noise of all those rivals who probably realized that there is a very similar problem of yours, and they're running and competing for the same pool of capital and expertise from investors? Okay, we're also encouraged to do something that is called building an MVP, a minimum viable product. You know, when you already have a great concept, but it's still not perfect. It works. I call it as a walking skeleton, right? You don't have the skin yet, you don't have the clothes yet, but you have the structure, and you see how that goes. It's good, but it's not sufficient. But because you will be constantly judged and criticized that your MVP is not sufficient enough. So there's one lesson we have to learn, that in its self-confidence, it's not really a thing. It's not enough. It is going to be very expensive for you if you do not base it on actual evidence. The second thing, what I've been realizing, and this is really pissing me off, you know why? Because I named it as a startup theater, and there's so many people who are acting like they're technically building disruptive solutions, but the most important part is that they do it because they want to please their ego. They want to please their vanity. And I believe that when women start creating new systems, probably ego is going to be the last thing on your list, because we're natural helpers, we want to take care of others, we want to join forces, we come up with a mutual perspective on things. And I believe that startup theater is a little bit more typical for male founders. Okay, this is just a personal observation, not supported by data. And there are so many events out there where you can go and pitch your business idea, but there are no real customers present. You go there, your name put on a billboard, you get the applause, but you never get real feedback if technically the system that you're offering would be bulletproof or not. And back to the mentors, right, who are only there to tell you beautiful things. What a wonderful business idea. You're doing so well. This is very dangerous, because if you're constantly praised, there is no real development happening. You are not growing. You're not challenged. So please avoid all mentors, whether they're men or women, right? Stay away from them if they're only telling you that everything is looking great and you're on the right track. That's absolutely useless. Okay. And we have to focus on traction, on friction, and not just, looking successful, because this is not going to take us to any kind of change. Number 3 problem: entrepreneurship is not motivation. When I talk with a lot of young female founders, they are always complaining about the fact that if someone wants to be an entrepreneur, you need a lot of motivation. Okay. Well, partially they are correct, but let's be careful here a little bit, because when you become an entrepreneur, it's technically putting you in a position that you would be dealing with uncertainty 24/7, and you have to take those decisions no matter what. Systems are changing, customers are, swapping their preferences every single day. There are new rivals popping in, and we have to deal with a lot of incomplete information. It's called information asymmetry in economics. So you never really have the full, let's say, 360 view version of the reality. It means that you will be choosing one option at the expense of another one. That's called a trade-off. And, if you get into that entrepreneurial mindset and you will be building new systems, maybe you'll be a startup founder, you are going to live with exposure. Are you ready for that? Okay, because not everyone is. And what I collected here on the right side of the slides, when you keep hearing all of these, great idea, keep going. Encouragement is beautiful, but I believe that especially us women, we must be challenged on a daily basis, because we want to prove much harder, right? We know what accountability is, and we just need to show that we do possess real evidence. Data will talk, friction will talk, but all those complaints and things that make you feel good about yourself and your project, they're not going to take you anywhere. So we have to say no to all of that, and please get rid of those people who are not helping you to grow. Okay, right. And the last problem what I collected here is something that is related to a famous book. Maybe you have heard of it. I do have it right here on my table next to me, The Lean Startup. This book was written quite a lot of years ago, back in 2011. But trust me, until these days, this is treated as the Bible for startups and those entrepreneurs who are ready to challenge the system. My only problem is that since 2011, the global environment has changed so much that we just cannot follow the rules, the suggestions of this book anymore, right? Platforms change dramatically. We live in the era of AI, right? This is already something that we have to deal on a daily basis. Capital changed quite a lot, the volatility of that, the way investors have access to innovative ideas. There's so many wonderful platforms where women founders are encouraged to participate. Please join them, especially on LinkedIn. There's so many groups, so many boot camps, especially for female startup founders, and it's a different community. Attention changed, right? It's shifted. Risks change. They're so much more higher. So when someone is trying to tell you that there's this one specific book, could be anything else as well, please look at the data of the publishing and then just estimate if it's still accurate for you, especially in the light of the events that we've been experiencing in the previous 5 or 6 years. And I was using one term quite a lot of times. I don't know if you have noticed it or not, but that was friction. I really want you to remember what friction is. And friction is technically something that allows you to provoke resistance from the market, that you will be building a new system, a new solution, call it whatever it is, whatever you want, right? But that will be fact-driven, evidence-driven. There will be slow adoption, okay? And not just from one day to another. And you just technically do not have a chance to confuse those signals. And while emotional discomfort will be always part of that, because friction is painful, if you want one really good sentence to remember what friction is when it comes to disruptive businesses, think about your solution. You want to solve an existing pain, but if it doesn't hurt enough, if it's not painful enough, your startup will have no chance to survive. So can you now actually think of a really acute problem that you experienced in the travel sector, right? That was really, really painful for you, okay? No matter what it is, right? Think about that. If you found it, I'm very sure that you're not the only one facing that. It means that you already have access to a pool of people who share the same issue, the same problem on the market that is technically being either unsolved or undersolved. That is good startup material. If it doesn't hurt, your startup is not real. This is something what I want you to remember. And that takes me to a really simple classification. You can look it up. It's an existing framework that all business ideas can be distinguished according to three categories. It's a metaphor, obviously. You can build something that is called, that would be a good equivalent of a candy, right? It's something that we rather associate with as a nice must-have thing, a trend. It's something attractive, something booming, but there is not a real need or demand for that. People will like it, but have a very short life expectancy. Okay. The second higher level is technically the vitamins. So those business solutions that would act as vitamins. We believe we need them. We believe it's good for our health, whatever it is. It's useful, but you cannot say it's urgent. So, and something that would be a little bit more protracted with the life cycle than the candy, but you cannot really base your startup on vitamins either. Okay. And one more thing, if you want a disruptive startup, please focus on something that will be a real painkiller. Okay. It is something that your customers, your guests, the travelers would be screaming for ASAP. They have such an urgent pain that has to be addressed right here, right now. This is a painkiller, okay? People are actively looking for it, and no matter what, they're willing to pay for that relief. Do you know such a painkiller? So back to your, problem that you were probably thinking of while I'm talking. Now, imagine it as an actual painkiller. Is there something out there that you could name at least 5 people that if you offer them the solution, they would pay for it right here, right now, no matter what, because the pain has to be gone. We are built for comfort. And that's a really important observation here. Okay. And that takes me back to the framework, what I have developed. And this is the time that I would like to share it with you. So you can apply it for any disruptive, innovative business idea that you might be having in the future. And it is called The Clash because you will see all the pillars. Technically, the purpose is here to find real problems and not just something that is happening in your head. It's a very typical thing, okay? We will be able to test assumptions quite early and to stay away of anything that is called startup theater, right? Praises and all those confidence boosting events and mentors that technically do not really help us. And we will have a sort of a system to build under uncertainty. So let's have a quick look at it. I'm a very visual type, and I named all the pillars of Clash after, let's say, certain ideas, and I just wanted to pick a certain type of an animal that would be related to it. So let's go through that, and I hope you will enjoy it. So we always begin with a concrete friction, right? You already have an idea what the problem might be at the market, right? And friction would be equivalent with a wolf, right? Why a wolf? Because they're technically the true survivors out there, and they have the best senses, and they're reading real signals perfectly. They're evolutionary designed for that. And in our case, we want to know what the actual observable problem is out there, not just a theory, not just something that I believe should be solved. We want to see if the measurable struggle is available as well. and just to collect those people, those affected parties that are already super frustrated. Okay. However, forget about such things as I think people would like this. It sounds cool. This is not startup material. Okay. For example, a really bad idea would be that you create an app for dog lovers just to share cute pictures. I'm not saying you would not make revenue with that, but what I'm saying that it doesn't really have friction. I don't see the pain behind that. So imagine the following: dog owners in cities struggle to find trusted emergency vets at night. This is painful already. And if you do have a dog, you know what that means. You do feel the emotion behind that. You do feel the frustration. That is friction. The rest is noise. Okay. The second one, L stands for loud proof. Okay. And loud proof would be the equivalent of an eagle, because an eagle can really see everything perfectly from that bird's view perspective, from above, all the details, the tiniest moves. And it means that we need to gather all evidence possible, even if you believe that it has nothing to do with the problem, because that might be part of it still. And it might be something that people are already paying for, or they're just like searching on it. Imagine you go on Reddit and you're looking into certain subreddits where people complain about an issue when it comes to checking in at the airport or at the specific hotel. That is already, proof for you. And existing workarounds, right? When we're looking into some possible ways to get out of the situation and, to build something that leads us to the solution itself. But it's not when your friends or colleagues are telling you, oh yeah, I would try it, I'd use it. It's not an Instagram poll that you're launching in the circle of your friends and family members, right? So be careful, because that has to be supported with existing real data, and that takes a lot of time. Right. Number 3 would be A for asymmetric edge, and the animal that came to my mind would be an actual snake. Okay. Snake is not known for strength, but, for its wisdom and obviously reading the environment. And it is using all these advantages. And what would that mean? Why you? Why do you think that you, as a young female entrepreneur, that you do have now the time and place to enter and disrupt the market with this business idea? Why now? Why not 2 years ago? Why not in 5 years? You have to know it quite early. And what advantage would you have compared to others, your competitors? Be very clear about those advantages, okay? Not something like, oh, right, we're going to work harder or we're passionate. It is beautiful on paper and let's say on a landing page, but that is not the edge. This is not going to be the edge of your startup. So let's truly get to the bottom of all this. The next pillar is going to be S for subversive MVP. And it would be paired with a lion because, well, the lion is technically the king of all animals. And, it never asks for any kind of permission. It just acts, right? Depending on the circumstances. So your subversive minimum viable product, think about your business idea again, would be the most easiest, simplest way to test that idea if it works. And if it doesn't, you have to, pivot, include some changes. It is low cost because at the beginning, you're not really equipped with capital. It is also coming with fast learning. So if you believe that you do not have the circumstances, the conditions for fast learning, do not think about it even. And it comes with real exposure as well. Okay. So do not try to imagine that your actual solution would be stuck in that form, which is the first iteration of that. Okay, so don't spend even a month on creating a design or a logo. Those things do not really matter. What matters is real feedback and your capability to build it into the next version. Okay, so for example, before building a travel app, you would create a landing page, a very simple one. You would use Google Ads and direct some expenses into it. And you would see if some people would visit that landing page, if they would sign up, if they would ask him questions, because that is already something that we can call a subversive MVP. Okay, and last but not least, what else do we have here? Heat index, H, right? The animal that you see on the right-hand side, I hope you know what that is. That is a big grizzly, okay? A bear. And a bear is an animal that always senses danger and intensity. That's why I am pairing it with heat index. You can't really get rid of a bear. If it's after you, you're technically done. Okay. So what does it measure? How urgent your problem is. This is really important. If your problem is not urgent, that is not going to be a startup material. How emotional is it? Okay. If your relationship with your business idea is emotional, get rid of that. You cannot have emotions. And again, this is something that acts against us women because we're really, really emotional. And we need to learn to get rid of all those, let's say, attachments, personal memories, fears that we're always developing in our brain, what might happen in the future if things are going wrong, right? So then we have no chance to do this. And how costly it would be to ignore it, okay? If you experience low heat, it means that, right, it's going to be inconvenient. High heat means pain, and pain is what we want exactly with the startup. For example, forgetting your water bottle, that would be low heat, but missing a flight because parking is full, that's high heat. It's a really simple example, but if you interpret it for something to do with your actual problem solution fit, then you could really see how that works. Right, so just to finish up with the clash, I really hope that you find this method as a useful tool. And one more time, in case you want to experiment with it, you just go into your ChatGPT account and you would search on Clash Lab, the startup friction coach, and you can feed anything into the GPT what you have regarding your problem statement, your possible solutions. Imagine you want to build a very wonderful femtech startup, and it will just break it down into pieces for you. It will criticize you. It will be really brutally honest and ruthless, but that's how I programmed the system. So it is not going to give you any compliments. If you're there for the compliments, please do not even log in, okay? And I truly hope that you will be able to get a little bit closer to what your startup might look like. I don't know, in the meantime, if there are any questions, maybe, please let me know. Feel free to interrupt.
This was just fantastic, Krisztina. I've enjoyed this so much since I have worked and I still work in the startup space. So absolutely precious.
Thank you so much. I'm happy that you found it useful. Let me know, please, if you have maybe any questions or any doubts or something that you would like to share on your end.
Yeah, I have to say that the bit about painkiller and nobody's coming to save you, and look at subreddits where people are talking about a problem. Professor Soreg has drummed it into us. So how I know a professor is from economics class at La Roche Crans-Montana. So I was going to say that, and she already covered all of that in her slides. So, and she's not joking when she says that if it's not painful, don't even go there. And the Clash Lab GPT is a real tester for your ideas, and it can be really brutally honest, like Krisztina has already said. And even when some of the ideas that we were doing in class, when we ran it past it, was saying too weak, bring evidence, more evidence about this. This is just theory at the moment. So I really support what the professor is saying. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharon. I was really happy to hear all these memories, back from the campus and your personal experience when you were building your business idea. And indeed, it's just, we are literally built for comfort, and our body, our mind just wants to avoid anything that is unpleasant, that is challenging you, that says no to you. But that's not the way to grow. Even in terms of economics, we say that if there's a lot of competition that is challenging the different companies and businesses, that's the only way to create innovation. So why don't we apply it to our own way of thinking when we're building new systems, especially as women? After, I told you all about the baby boomer playbook. So how about that?
Anyone else?
Yeah, I was going to say the same. I wondered whether Elizabeth, Sam, Fatima had any questions or any points, any reflections from what Krisztina was saying.
Well, it was really, how can I say, I'm still, astonished, because this was really, really very interesting. I was listening at what you were saying. It was really looking around me and my experience and how I felt that everything is so true, so clear, and it makes all the sense. And sometimes we waste so much time in doing a lot of efforts in things that really doesn't pay off or come back to us.
Yeah.
And this is true. I mean, it's so true. If you don't have really pain, don't even bother, because you just waste time. You just invest a lot of your effort and everything. And being a woman is even more difficult, as you mentioned.
It's never an easy.
It's never easy. It's always so difficult, and of course, you need to show that you are better to be successful and to do something out of that makes a difference, and that people trust you, and.
Right.
And yes, I mean, it was really very interesting. All this comparison with the animals. It's really brilliant. I mean, it's
You know, I'm
really,
a very
really.
visual type, so technically I did it for myself, and I just had to come up with some interesting
But it
metaphors
is
for
stressful
that.
because you visualize and you
Yeah,
really, make map it to the reality. And it's
uh,
true. It's true.
thank you
It
for the
was
amazing.
really very interesting. Very, very, very. I really loved it.
I appreciate your feedback, and it just made me think of my own grandmother when I was a little girl. She was one of those women who went through so many things. She was born during the 1930s. She used to live on the territory of in between Ukraine and Hungary, and she was born into a family of priests technically. So all the communists were after them all the time, and she became really resilient. And
My God,
every
yes.
single time, she was the only person in the family who always shared the most brutal truth, whatever it is, the way you look, the way you think, the way you cook, no matter what, she always told the truth. And she always apologized, but she said, if no one is saying the truth, then there must be a person. And it just somehow got into my head. And you never know, like the way you brought up as a kid or even as a teenager, when those lessons will truly get back to you, and you start seeing things in a different pattern. So your past will be always part of your present, but I believe that we're the ones who have to kind of take control of it, and you decide which part of that past should be really helping you with growing and not limiting you. So that's
Yes.
why one last takeaway, what I put for the end of the slides, I never even made it to the end, is that I believe that our capability is actually turning into power when we're no longer using it for compensating broken systems. But we have to know when the system is broken, and then you stop fixing it and you start building something completely new.
Exactly. You know that I lived in Budapest for 1 year.
Oh, really?
And it was very interesting because I also met some Hungarian people that said, well, he said, a friend of mine, that his mother had to dress like a man when the Russians came.
Yeah.
And she had to go work. She had to dress like a man. Otherwise, she would be very difficult and very, they would, you know what I mean.
Take advantage of her. Yeah. Makes sense. That's
So
all.
it was real. Women need to be really resilient and powerful, and even try to change and be different, like a mask. Being a mask of a man or something like that, to be more powerful and to be different. And it was really, for me, it was really, like, okay, how does it happen that a woman needs to dress like a man so that she can survive,
But isn't it true these days, again, if you think about all those
it's the same thing, yes.
tech founders or top executives, if you make it to the top, you must act like a man. You don't have to look like a man, but you need to behave like a man. You need to talk like a man. Yeah.
It's the same situation. Exactly.
It's very sad, but this is one of the things that really takes you to the top, and I really don't like it, because you cannot really deny what you are, who you are, how you think. That yes, we are emotional, but we can kind of switch it off when it comes to all those things, and that's why it's always good, to share these observations.
That's been super valuable. This absolutely amazing, and I really enjoyed the animal bit there.
And your 3 dogs are you wonderful.
Indeed. 3 dogs and a hedgehog, so the whole zoo is
But super valuable. Like I said, I will stop the recording now, and from all of us, thank you so very, very much. This was super interesting.
Thank you so much. I really